Hello and welcome to the next episode of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Roosh, a high school teacher and podcaster now who's trying to highlight different perspectives and get people to think and challenge the status quo to some degree using this podcast. So today my guest is Zuby. Zuby is a musician, an author, a podcaster, an Oxford grad, and he is someone who kind of stirs the pot a little bit. And I think that the reason why I wanted to reach out to him is because he has a voice that is now getting a little bit of mainstream attention, but generally is not. And that is part of what this podcast is all about, is highlighting different perspectives from everywhere. And I think the way that his mind works is valuable. So Zuby, welcome to the podcast. Can you just introduce yourself to the audience a little bit? Hopefully there's some people who are unfamiliar with you and let them know a little bit about you and your background and what you're all about.
Yeah, sure thing. Appreciate it, Will. So I'm Zuby. As you've already said, I'm an independent professional rapper, podcaster. I run my show, Real Talk with Zuby. I'm a life coach, fitness coach, author of the book Strong Advice, Zuby's Guide to Fitness for Everybody. I've appeared on a lot of things, best known ones probably being the Joe Rogan Experience, Ben Shapiro Show, Fox News, Sky News, BBC, whole bunch of different platforms. So in terms of my background, I was born in the UK. I am British. I know I don't sound it. I grew up in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia. I lived there for 19 years, went to an American/international school while I was out there. And my family background is originally from Nigeria. So that's a little bit about my background. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but that's a sort of quick summary of it.
Yeah. Well, you do, and we talked about it just a little bit off the air, like you do a lot of interviews, a lot. My question for you, and which is, is this accurate to say, like, if someone wants to talk to you and get your perspective, you'll give it? You're just open to that?
Mostly. I mean, I'm gonna need to start becoming way more picky this year because I've only got so much time, and my time is literally my money. So I can't do as many interviews. I think I did excluding my own podcast, I certainly did well over 50 interviews last year. So different radio, TV, podcast, stuff like that, including mine. I mean, I think I did, including my own show, I must have done 130, 140 interviews, something ridiculous like that. So, and I've already probably done about 20 this year already, and we're only 26 days into it. But I'm going to block out some time this year because I want to work on another book. I want to work on some new music. I've got a whole bunch of stuff to do. But generally, I enjoy conversation. That's why I started my own podcast. And so I'm happy to contribute to the conversation where I can.
Yeah. I mean, well, also when you go on shows like Ben Shapiro, or especially Joe Rogan, I mean, it's so big. Joe Rogan, that's a weird phenomenon. The Rogan effect, whatever it is, in air quotes, is number of downloads. It's like 150 or 180 million a month. It's so big, yet it's very mainstream. Like he'll have on, Robert Downey Jr. to promote Dr. Dolittle, and then he'll also have on some comedian who no one knows and talk about drugs. But it's a weird thing because it's mainstream, but it's also not. There are also people who are is he in the mainstream conversation at the Oscars or something like that or whatever, ABC News? Not really.
I think we need to redefine the word mainstream because what used to be the old mainstream is in many ways less popular than some of the avenues that are not considered mainstream. I mean, the Joe Rogan podcast would be the perfect example of that. I mean, he invited me on. I'm an independent, unsigned musician from the UK. Yeah. Right. He invited me on. Joe Biden wanted to come on and he said no.
Right.
Elizabeth Warren wanted to come on and he said no, but he's had Zuby and he's already said that he'd be happy to have me back. So the way Joe works, I mean, Joe's a very real guy. So shout out to Joe and big up to him for having me on. It was a great opportunity. I think he just has people on who he likes and who he wants to speak to. I think his philosophy is pretty much that simple. If he's not interested in talking to you, he won't have you on. And if he is, he will, regardless of the size of somebody's profile. Obviously, you'll need to have some profile for it to get on his radar. But I kind of like that philosophy and approach. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do. you know,
Oh yeah, no
um,
question.
yeah. So, but when you're doing these interviews, how many of them would you say lean to the free thinking side, the intellectual dark web stuff, or the conservative side, compared to how much is more on the social justice progressive left when I talk to you?
Oh, I mean, I've no, like left wing media doesn't want to talk to me.
Not at all, right?
No, they're intolerant as hell. Like, no, they're not interested. Someone like me destroys the narrative from every single direction. And I
Okay.
think they know that, and I do believe that they fear that.
Okay, so that's kind of what I'm getting to. Is I want to
Yep.
talk about identity, a little bit about privilege and stuff like that. And then to be honest, I kind of want to just walk away for a bit from the social justice wokeness stuff, because I want to address it, because I think it's something that's going on in our society, but also I don't want that to be what I'm all about. And it's I think it's important, but it's not the most important thing. So I do want
Yeah,
to talk about it with you. But then just for my audience, like that's not what the podcast is going to become. There's a lot more
that's
to it.
okay, man.
As I'm sure there's a lot more to you. Like, you're not this whole thing. You've kind of fell into this too, right? Like,
Yeah, dude, I'm not I didn't come here to fight the culture war, but
right.
I've got a certain view and perspective that is needed in the conversation, and which seemed to be missing, and nobody seemed to be filling in that gap. So, if God gives me a purpose, then certain things are important, and so I've got to do it, even if it means that I go slightly off course from what I believed my original purpose was, and that's fine, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that resonates with me. So talk about identity, like how you identify. I talked about this with Lex
Sorry,
Horowitz recently.
that makes me laugh.
I know, because I asked some people, and they're like, well, I identify as, like female or male or as black, and then I asked other people, and they're like, identify as a computer programmer, or I identify
Yeah, yeah.
like, or like, even they're confused by the question,
Mm. You had any
so
attack
yeah.
helicopters? Must have done.
Huh?
You must have had a few attack helicopters, surely.
A few. I mean,
Okay.
but not much. I think I'm just lower. I'm out of the radar, and I also think it's partially that I'm under the radar, and I think it's partially that people, I'm pretty open that I will talk to anyone anytime. And I do my homework. I'm a bit of, as much as I don't think of myself as an intellectual, I read a lot, and I'm in the academic space. So I'm ready to defend what I believe to be right. And if I'm proven wrong, I love it. But I think people just don't want to get into it, because I might be, every time I have brought it up to people, individuals in the podcast that push for some sort of privilege narrative or something like that, and I just ask a little bit, they stop talking to me. I mean, so it's not that
Well,
they attack.
on the podcast, they stopped talking to you.
No, they're really
Oh,
nice on the podcast, and
oh,
then I
okay,
reach
okay.
out afterwards, and they completely shut down.
Oh, I
And
wonder
it's
why.
it's, it's disappointing.
Mm.
To me, it is, because I'm trying to go into this a little bit naive. Like, why don't you want to just have the best ideas, and don't you want to talk about this stuff? And the answer is no,
No, they don't.
no.
No.
So when you talk about like how people identify, I think it was Ayanna Presley,
Oh, good grief.
the congresswoman, was talking
Mm.
about, if you're black and you don't speak for black voices, you're gay and you don't speak for gay voices. And that really rubbed me the wrong way as a government civics teacher, because
Mm.
that's to say that you are supposed to think a certain way based on these characteristics, and that's just not, after doing the podcast and talking to people, that's not the way that people are. Is Thomas
Mm.
Sowell not black? John McWhorter, Glenn Lowry, are you not black? Like, what?
According to some people, I'm not. According to some people, I'm African but not black. I've heard that one before.
Okay, so yeah, what is your take on this kind of, just getting right into it, like this
Yeah.
idea that you are whatever the names are of someone who is not helping,
Mm.
black people in the world, in America, etc. Like,
Yeah.
how do
It's
you
freaking
respond to that?
stupid.
Yeah.
Honestly, that simple. It's freaking stupid. And I have a very, it's just, it angers me. Right. And I don't get angry. I'm maybe not angry. I'm very hard to make angry. So maybe angry is not the right word, but it's frankly ridiculous. And I have a high tolerance for everything in terms of my willingness to speak to people, right? Like, I'm willing to talk to people, like you said, of all different perspectives, everything like that. But I have a low tolerance for people who are dishonest and people who can't have a civilized debate and who can't have a conversation without resorting to try to insult or slander or misrepresent the person who they are speaking to or with or about, right? Think that's very deceitful. I think it's it's extremely dishonest, and it's not the sign of a good person. It's really not the sign of a good person. And I like to come from a perspective that most people have good intentions, even people I disagree with, right? I like to always start from a point assuming the best intentions, but there are people out there who have bad intentions, and the worst ones are those who sort of sugarcoat it in this way to make it seem like they are the good guys, but they're really, really not. And I think people need to stop giving them leeway. People are still kind of A lot of people are still kind of going along with the, oh well, they mean well, and I'm like, no, a lot of these people really do not mean well. And that becomes very apparent as soon as you disagree with them, or as soon as you push back a little bit against some of their ideas, right? See what they call you, right? See how they treat you, see what they do to you, and you will see that this is not the sign of a good person, because good people don't behave like that, right? If someone is threatening you physically, say, for example, right? If you disagree with someone and their response is to threaten you with violence, right? That's not a sign of a good person, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the disagreement is about. That's not how decent people respond. Decent people don't expect you to, you know, coming back to your example, I mean, you were literally talking about this, ridiculous level of identity politics where someone is just supposed to be a mouthpiece for whatever intersectional place that they fit in. And look, that's directly sexist. That's directly racist. This is directly all of the things that these people are claiming to be against. And that's insane. I mean, can you imagine if someone came out, if a politician came out and they said that we don't want any white voices unless they're going to be a voice for the white people? How would that go down?
Right.
Seriously, like, can you imagine a Republican congressman comes out there and says, "Look, we don't want any white voices in the Republican Party unless you're going to be a voice for the white people." Can you imagine? Right?
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that there's no. I don't play double standards when it comes to this stuff, right? I'm across the board, right? I'm pro equality, like in the true sense, and very few people actually. A lot of people are not actually, right? Especially when it comes to these progressives, right? They love the words equality, they love the word diverse, they love the word inclusion, like they love the word tolerance. They're the opposite of all of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many of these people, they are literally the opposite of everything that they claim to be. So all of the names that they're trying to call other people, it's like that's literally what they are. That's what they're doing. If you're trying to have a conversation with someone and they said, "Oh, well, you don't know anything. You're just a white man," right?
Mm-hmm.
What the heck? Can you imagine someone saying that to a black woman? It's
Right.
the same. Can you imagine someone saying that to a Jewish person, an Asian person? It's just what do you know, right? You're just a black guy. Like,
Well, and in history, that is what happened. Yeah.
yeah, it is. And it's like, look,
And that's what we
what
fought
I've,
against. Yeah.
absolutely. What I've observed is a lot of people are not really in favor of equality. Okay. All they want is they want to be the ones wearing the jackboots, right? When the oppression begins, they want to be the oppressor. They don't want to be the victim. But
Mm-hmm.
so it's not, their problem isn't that a certain situation is unequal. They're just mad that they're not the ones who are doing the oppressing. And you're seeing this now because you're seeing a lot of what is like, how would I put it? People who are actually the bullies playing the victim. So they're claiming, okay, I'm a victim here. I'm being attacked. I'm being aggressed upon, or whatever. But really, they're sort of hiding behind this mask, and they're using this mask, which unfortunately works with a lot of people. And they're using this mask, and then they're just using the same weapon and the same words and the same strategies and logic and ideas and everything to just attack and demonize whoever they want to declare open season on, right? It might be straight white men right now. It might be straight black men tomorrow, right? It might be whoever it is. And it's like, look, it doesn't matter who that demographic is. If you view the world, if you view the people in the world as individuals, which is what most people do, right?
Yeah.
Like in the real world, most people do view each other as individuals, not through these little lenses. Um, then yeah, you quickly realize how foolish that kind of thinking is, regardless of what direction it's running in. It's the same reason why, like, old school, racism that used to exist is really stupid and really dumb. And it's also the reason why this sort of new age inverted sense of racism is also really stupid and really dumb, because you're just doing the same thing. You just put the shoe on the other foot and you're just doing the exact same thing that you claim to be standing against. And so I will stand against that in the same way that I would stand against, I don't know, say someone if you had someone on the far right who's sort of more just direct and blatant in their racism, let's say, right?
Which exists. Yeah.
Yeah, which exists, of course.
Yeah.
But it exists on the other side as well. In fact, they have a lot in common. And yeah, I'm sure both of those type of people would hate to have a lot in common, but they really do. And I think, look, all the normal people, right? Then the 90 something percent of people who don't want to play any of these games, that's why it's important that they speak up, because the people on the fringes always tend to be the loudest.
Yeah, like I read the Douglas Murray book, Madness of Crowds, and I've talked about it on my social media a little bit. And that book, I just in a nutshell, this is the hypocrisy of a lot of the social justice kind of movements. So my question is, like, is highlighting the hypocrisy or getting someone like you onto a conservative show so that people can be like, look how like mixed up you are, you're a hypocrite. Is that the best approach? And I think it resonates with people who are already against it. But if you're for it, like, no one wants to be called a hypocrite. And we all are in so many ways. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a school teacher and I probably cheat on certain things all the time, but I tell my kids not to cheat or whatever. And if they highlight that, I will justify it, like, well, not really, because of blah, 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 blah. Like, I get why we push back and we highlight like the nonsense of it. But I'm familiar with the psychological effect of the backfire effect. I don't know if it works. I think it works on someone who is willing to recognize and wants to, I should say, wants to have the best ideas. But there are a lot of people who don't, and you highlight their hypocrisy, it'll just dig their feet in more, and it'll just get them to remove themselves from the conversation. They won't talk about it, and they'll just go off into their echo chamber, and it'll fester and boil. And, when people have asked me, like, well, how do you know that you're on the right side of things? And this doesn't just go for the social justice stuff. This just goes in general. I believe that I'm on the right side of things for one reason, and that is I am willing to talk about it.
Of course.
I want to hear, if you think I'm wrong, don't retreat to your side and talk about how I'm this or that. Come talk to me. I have a forum for this. I have invited so many people who disagree with me on, and they won't talk to me. And that's why I think I'm right, because you can't prove me wrong, but I welcome being proven wrong. Do you know what I'm saying?
If you're confident in your own opinions, then you're not afraid of speaking to people. It's really that simple, right? If you believe in what you believe, and then you should be willing to have those beliefs challenged, no matter how strongly they're held, how much conviction you have. If you're not, then that's a sign that either you're a coward or you're really not as confident in your beliefs as maybe you think you are. And this is the case. Or perhaps you're just, very, again, you're someone like that may legitimately be intolerant. So you may be saying, yes, I'm tolerant, but then in practice, tolerance isn't only associating with and talking to and acquainting yourself with people who 100% agree with you on everything. The whole point of tolerance is the ability to associate with and live with and inhabit the same street, nation as people who are different. That could be on all sorts of different social dimensions. That could be on politics. That could be on religion or no religion. That could be, there are no two people in the world really totally 100% agree with each other on absolutely everything. Like, that's just not how the world.
Which is awesome.
Which is great.
That's how we get the best ideas. Yeah.
Is that not diversity? This is the thing. It's like people are talking diversity this, diversity that. It's like, these people hate diversity, man. You just want to have people of different melanin levels who all think exactly the same thing, right? They don't like
Yeah.
diversity. Like if, like, they'll say we want more black voices, and I'll be like, oh, hey, what's up? And they're like, oh, no, not like that.
Yeah.
Like
No.
not right?
Yeah.
Not those ones. No, not those ones. I mean, Ayanna Presley she was actually surprisingly honest there, because that's how they think.
Yeah.
That's how they think. She just said it, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they kind of let it slip in something they say, but it's like, well, yeah, that is what they believe. And it's like, okay, well, you then are being the antithesis of all those things that you claim. And I've never met this lady. I don't want to target her
No. Yeah.
specifically, but it would be interesting with someone like her. I imagine, no, she probably wouldn't be willing to go on a lot of different shows
No.
or
No.
podcasts or things like that, right? If it's one that is just going to be a little left-wing echo chamber, if they want to invite her onto The View, I'm sure she'd go on The View. If Ben Shapiro wanted to invite her on a Sunday special, or even Rogan, who's in fact more left-leaning anyway,
Yeah.
wanted to have her on the show, or Tucker Carlson wanted to invite her on, do you think she'd go? Of course not. The email would go unanswered.
Yeah.
And that is unfortunately a very, very observable pattern across those people. I mean, a lot of people ask me, oh, how come like most of the stuff you appear on is more right-wing leaning, or why is it more conservative, or
That's who
whatever?
invites you.
And I'm like, that's who, like, literally,
Yeah.
that is who invites me, right? These other people, like, lots of them know who I am, right? They know I'm out there, but it's like, yeah, again, and like I said, and they'll be saying, oh, we want, every time they bring a black person on some of these shows, it's always someone who's got the victim mentality and who wants to come on and talk identity politics
Yeah.
and talk about how the white man is bad, and talk about how, we need X, Y, and Z policies for people of color and this and that. And it'll very rarely be someone who's got a different idea. And, I mean, people act like conservative leaning black people are rare. It's like, no, they're not. On average, I mean, on a global level, black people are probably not probably, black people are way more conservative than white
Well, in
people are.
America, it's 40%, but they
Dude,
don't vote Democrat, but they're 40%.
yeah. Yeah. But dude, on a global scale, I mean, there's this big place called Africa. Okay.
Yeah.
It's pretty conservative,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's pretty conservative. It's certainly far more conservative than Europe and Australia and North America. So when people act like these are sort of rare views or something, I'm like, gosh, you need to get out into the wider world.
Well,
Because
yeah, testing the hypothesis. How many K through 12 educators, teachers have reached out to you to talk to you?
you,
I'm the only one.
yeah,
Yeah. Like, and I know the answer to that. And I would even go as far as, I don't even know if teachers are aware, because to be aware of you, they would have to consume the places that invite you. So it becomes this
yeah,
cycle. And
it
when you
does.
said cowardice, I have been very vocal as being someone who is against cowards. And
Good.
that sounds harsh, but the way I kind of define it, which is probably a similar definition in the dictionary, is you choose fear over what you believe to be right. And that is not something that we should be okay with. But I think that's what it is. I think that's very clearly what it is people who, I mean, we just had Martin Luther King Day. Like a major part of his creed was like this concept of doing what's right, even though it might really negatively affect you. And it killed him. But you
Yes.
do what's right, you stand up for what's right. And that's what you hang your hat on, even if it's scary, even if it's going to threaten you. But
Most people won't do that, man.
the most people won't.
No.
Yeah. And it's very easy to not do that under the guise of I'm doing something caring, because the term social justice sounds wonderful. The whole idea of helping marginalized people or Black people who have been in America, like the history of slavery is real. I'm hyper aware of it. I teach it. I teach you American history. Like, yes, and this. Like it's very easy just to sit back and say I'm doing the right thing because I'm being told that, because I know history, whatever it is. But it is cowardly if you don't want to have a conversation. You're being a coward, and that's not something we should celebrate. And that's not something we should teach to kids. That's not something I'm going to teach to my two boys. Like, that's not something I teach to my students. I teach them to stand up for what you believe to be right.
Yeah. I agree with you completely, man. I mean, I'm very much an optimist, but this may sound a little bit pessimistic, but just like most people are not leaders, right? Most people are followers. That's sort of the default human setting. Leaders are relatively rare. I do believe that people with true bravery or people who are not cowards are actually relatively rare. And I don't mean to say that as a condemnation on the majority of people, but I just think that is the truth. And I think that history reflects that, right? The people who are willing to stick their neck out a little bit. And it doesn't even mean, I mean, people call me brave all the time. And I'm like, dude, right. By my own standards of bravery, I'm like, I'm not brave, man. Firemen are brave. People in the military are brave on the front lines. I don't do anything that's going to get me killed. You see what I mean, right? I say stuff online. I talk on podcasts and I do interviews and I keep it real on Twitter. Like, that's not brave. I might get some anime avatars angry at me once in a while,
Right.
but that's not like shipping off and going to war. And I'm ducking bullets and there's grenades going off around me and my friends are getting maimed. I'm like, that's bravery to me, man. Like, my bar for that is so much higher. But it seems like a lot of people aren't even able to reach the bar that people like myself and yourself reach. And perhaps that's just how humans are wired. I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't. I guess where I struggle is I am confused why people, especially educators, okay, people have devoted their lives to some sort of understanding of reality. Why would you not embrace being proven wrong? I think being proven wrong is the shortcut. That's the fast track to having the best ideas in the world. That's why I'm so willing to have conversations, and I get proven wrong all the time. People are always like, "Well, what about this huge blind spot?" It's like, "Oh yeah, whoops, thank you."
Yeah, that's why conversation's important.
Yeah, it's like an ego thing. People don't want to be proven wrong. Like you say something, someone's like, "Well, what about this specific instance or that?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, thank you." But people don't want that. People don't want to be proven wrong, and I think that is I think it's a misstep. I think it's the wrong approach to life in general. It's the mistakes, it's the failures, it's the setbacks, it's being shown your blind spots and your shortcomings that are going to make you better.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, I mean, I do believe that a lot of human behavior is, if you sort of drill it down a little bit, a lot of it is rooted in fear, right? The most common being fear of judgment from other people. I don't think there's any fear that's greater than the fear of judgment from other people. It's what's the biggest phobia in the world? It's actually public speaking. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
Right. There's more people afraid of public speaking than who are afraid of death.
I know. Seinfeld had that great joke that you'd rather be in the casket than give the eulogy.
That's funny. Yeah. What's it called? Glossophobia. Yeah. I think over 50% of the population has that. I mean, I don't have it. I'm fine with public speaking, but and that already is a sign that I'm an outlier. You know what I mean? Because I can do stuff like that and it doesn't bother me. But yeah, fear really cripples a lot of people. And then on top of that, I think there's the idea of kind of like a sunk cost. So if you've believed something, I mean, the longer you've believed something for, and especially if you've devoted your life to it in some way, shape, or form, I mean, you really, really, really don't want to be proven wrong. You really don't want to be proven wrong. I mean, and that goes for absolutely everybody. That goes for myself. I mean, right. So what's something I've believed my entire life? I've believed in God my entire life. I've been a Christian my entire life. Right. I don't want to be proven wrong. Of course not.
Could you?
Huh?
Yeah. I mean, could you though? I wonder if isn't that a faith? Like, isn't religion one of those things where it is faith-based? So you could have Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson going at it. And like, at the end of the day, like it's you, I don't know, can you, if your faith is strong in Christianity, like that's not something that you can quantify. Hey, look at this study. It's like, it. It's like in the Matrix from like your, bones to balls. Like you just know, like your relationship with God and
with God. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I use that as one example, but it goes for any that applies to almost any belief. Religion is a good one because that tends to be quite a lifelong thing.
Yeah.
But say the same with a political ideology or even just a belief about one specific issue. Even say say someone's been a feminist for 15 years, right? Like a real feminist, okay? And they believe in the patriarchy. They believe that the wage gap is due purely to sexism. They believe that 1 in 4 women who go to college in the U.S. are victims of rape or sexual assault. They believe all of these narratives, right? They believe that men are really, really out there to get them, and they've been campaigning that. They've got friends who believe in the same thing. They're in online communities. They've got feminist in their Twitter bio, right? They're dedicated to it. And someone like that really, really does not want to be proven wrong, right? It's not hard to prove
who they are. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's as if a bear's threatening you. Like it's as if your life is threatened. Your
Yes,
identity, the topic, is being threatened. Yeah.
And that's a good example, because lots of those things I said can be factual. They can be proven wrong with facts.
Yes.
Okay. If someone believes that the wage gap is purely due to sexism, there are facts, there's data, there's studies, you can prove them wrong. Okay. And people, like we were saying, people don't like being proven wrong. And that's the weird thing is when, so I think you're similar to me in that maybe you are, I'm going to make an assumption here. Like when I'm proven wrong with something that's can totally be proven wrong, sort of fact wise, I change my mind very quickly.
Yeah, right away. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. I think I thought you'd be similar in that regard, right? I changed my mind very, very quickly. And what is weird is when you're talking to someone who can't do that, right? You show them literally the facts. You put the data in front of them, and they still don't care, right? They still dig in, and that is when that's when you're dealing with someone who's really kind of an ideologue. And at that stage, I think you almost have to allow them to come to their own conclusion. You can only do so much. And if someone is just outright denying facts, denying evidence, denying data, then the conversation sort of has to end, because you've done all you can do, and they need to reach their own conclusion. And sometimes they will, and then later on they'll think they reached that conclusion by themselves. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's like James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose and Peter Boghossian there's a talk, and I think it's probably on YouTube somewhere, but they said, is intersectionality and social justice a religion?
Yes.
Because religion is one of those where you could probably prove, whatever it is in some way, that God didn't do this or whatever it is through Darwinism, but like, it doesn't matter. You're not going to prove me wrong. And that's kind of the way that I think that it works in their mind, is it actually a lot of these ideas, it facilitates like a religion in that you can't prove me wrong no matter what.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about privilege really quickly, and then I do want to talk about your music. So those are the two things I do want to still talk about. You tweeted out something about privilege, and it was actually the argument, if that's the right word, I don't think it is, but it's kind of the questions I had about privilege, and I've given that to several people on the podcast who bring up privilege and white privilege and stuff, and I haven't gotten a good response to it. So I'm going to try and think my way through it, but I have it in front of me. The tweet that you did was some things that are way more real and universal than so-called white privilege. Born in a developed country privilege, born in a modern era privilege, two-parent household privilege, inherited wealth privilege, high IQ privilege, good-looking privilege, height privilege. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if you have health on there. But
I ran out of characters.
Yeah, right. But I mean, that's the question I have is, what's to say that white privilege, or I am straight, white, male, Protestant.
How dare you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 6'3". Like I meet
conversation
all of
over. Conversation over.
Right. And so me pushing back on this makes me very brave. But the idea of privilege, like your tweet there, I'm not on Twitter much, but I did see that, and I was like, yeah, that's the question, because again, you can quantify. You look at the data of what happens when someone is from these specifics, or someone might have, they might be black or brown, but they have two parents in the household. They have, wealth. They have, Will Smith's kids, whatever. Like this is a complicated matrix. Yes, privilege exists, of course, and perhaps white privilege exists. I mean, I could even subscribe to that, but to say that it's the most important privilege, that's where I push back. So can you just expand a little bit on your idea?
Yeah. Sure. Do you know what a good first question to ask, which nobody seems to even ask, is what is the goal of defining these privileges?
Right.
You see? So if someone is really, really keen on the idea, if someone's really keen on the idea of white privilege or male privilege, what's their goal? What's the intention here? Right. I'm not asking you that question, but that would be a good question to ask somebody who's, you know, what's the motive here? Why
Well,
is
what I've gotten is
yeah.
essentially to make people aware so that they
Mm-hmm.
can be an advocate for the oppressed.
Oh,
So
to turn them into
awareness,
an
it's holding up a
turn
mirror,
them into an SJW.
holding up a mirror. Yeah.
Okay. See, the thing is, we all implicitly know and realize that every single human being on Earth has advantages and disadvantages compared to the other human beings on Earth. Right? We
Mhm.
all know this implicitly. Every single person is different.
Yeah.
Right? You've got on every characteristic, personality, appearance, physical ability, strength, speed, how high you can jump, how fast you can swim, how intelligent you are, what subjects you're good at and what subjects we all have advantages and disadvantages, right? So I don't even particularly like the term privilege in this sense. I mean, what's funny with everyone, I've never met anyone who's obsessed with the idea of privilege who's not privileged.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's one that's funny, right? I've never been
Right.
to a place where people are legitimately underprivileged and they're there talking about privilege, let alone racial privilege or gender-based privilege or anything like that. It's a very privileged idea.
Yeah, they're trying. Well,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, I have connections to like really poor villages in the Philippines, and like they're
Mhm.
too busy. Like, I'm trying to grind. I'm trying to
Trying to
get
live.
up to the top. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to look at what I don't have. I'm going to look at what I'm trying to get here because it's not
Yeah.
going to. How's that going to help me to sit around and go, oh my gosh, look look at the shitty situation I'm in. Like, they're
Yeah.
too busy like trying to get out of it to sit there and focus on it or talk about it with their therapist.
It
Yeah,
goes for a lot of stuff we're discussing in the modern West at the moment,
yeah,
if we're being honest. So I mean, look, in terms of privilege, the way I frame it is if I'm talking to someone who's really, really keen on this idea of white privilege, I tend to ask them a few questions. I say, okay, do you believe that black privilege exists? Do you believe that Asian privilege exists?
mhm,
Do you believe that Arab privilege exists? Like in any way, shape, or form? Do you think there's anything in the world, you know, not don't even say the whole world, okay? If you're in the USA and you're a black man or a black woman, do you have any are there any advantages you may think you may potentially have over someone who's of any other race, right? And there are
yeah,
some that are obvious, right? What about affirmative action, right? What about the fact that when we were talking before, you said that I can say certain things, right? And receive potentially less backlash than if the exact same words came out of your mouth. Is that not a form of privilege or advantage in some way that there are certain things that can't be levied at me, right? You're way more likely to get accused of racism than I am.
hmm yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I'm playing the game to some degree because I want to have this conversation, and I shouldn't say it's for you particularly, Zuby,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that you're way more nuanced in this, but I'm, I would want, I would rather have this conversation with someone who is from one of those categories playing their game.
Yeah.
Because if it's just me and another, waspy white guy,
Mm-hmm.
then I feel like it's so easily shut down. And I'm kind of
Yeah.
playing along with it then.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with this. This is one of the most insidious things about identity politics is that even if you don't want to play the game, you can end up being forced to play it in some way just because
Yeah, which I do.
just to address it, you almost have to have that ability. And I mean, I'm conscious of that. I'm aware of the fact that like I don't care about race is one of the least things I care about when it comes to a person. But of course, I'm cognizant of the fact that yeah, I can say certain things more bluntly and perhaps more forcefully than I may be able to if I looked like you.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean that's a privilege. That's an advantage. What about me? I'm a rapper. Okay, in the world of hip hop and rap, prior, Eminem, of course, sort of changed the rules a little bit, and you've got a lot of successful white rappers now. But even still now, if you are a black male rapper, you've probably got an advantage in terms of sort of how seriously,
Mhm.
initially at least, people will take you just because of what you look like, right? That could be deemed a form of privilege. So if someone is willing to accept that various forms of privilege exist across all these different dimensions. People talk about male privilege. Are you telling me there's no advantages to being female in society? Of course there are. Are there advantages to being male? Sure. I never get pregnant. I can't get
Right.
pregnant. I never have to go through the pain of giving birth. Um, I'm physically stronger. I'm taller. Uh, but you know what? I don't live as long, right? My life expectancy is lower. right? And I may not have as much flexibility in certain. So there are advantages and disadvantages to any trait or characteristic or anything like that. So to me, it's just kind of like the concept of white privilege almost becomes moot at that point. You see what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
like, well, how do you do the math? How do you stack it all up? And then, as you were saying in that tweet I put, those things I said, those are all things that I do genuinely believe are more important than any
Mhm.
sort of racial privilege, even if that did exist, right? Would you rather be a white guy in Appalachia with
Right.
living in a trailer park with no money and who's not particularly intelligent, or would you rather be like a black guy who's middle class, parents went to university, his parents have a lot of money, he's raised in a great environment, he's smart, he's
Yeah.
talented? Like, seriously, you're telling me that no one who's serious could ever say that the first guy is advantaged or privileged over the second guy? I mean,
Yeah,
come on, that
not
doesn't.
in 2020. You
No,
again, you go back to before the 1960s, and yes, yeah, then you say like, yeah, I'd rather be poor and white because at least I can advance. And it
maybe.
was very difficult to yeah,
Yeah, maybe.
maybe, yeah, maybe you can,
Maybe. I
but
mean,
there
there
aren't as
still would be a.
hard boundaries.
Absolutely,
There were
absolutely.
hard boundaries. You are not welcome in
Yes,
university.
yeah,
No matter
and
how brilliant you are.
yeah, and a
We
lot
got
of
rid of
things that
that,
people.
thank God.
We did. Yeah,
Yeah.
man, dude. Like I said, what was one of the things on the list? Being born in the modern era of privilege,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Super important.
I'm much better off in infinite ways than my grandfather was,
Yeah.
right? Or my great grandfather. This goes for everybody. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter where you're from, unless like almost everybody is better off than their grandparents in many ways, even just in terms of access to medicine and technology and life expectancy, all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, they say that someone who's like totally average income right now is living better than royalty did just
Yeah.
over a century ago.
Yeah.
It's
I've read
like,
stuff on that.
yeah,
That's awesome.
stuff has changed so much, man.
Yeah.
um and then if you're talking about white privilege again, a lot of what people call white privilege is simply majority privilege, right? So if I go back to Nigeria, then where I'm now in the ethnic racial majority, then a lot of the things. So if you talk to some people and you say, okay, what are some examples of white privilege? And they'll say, oh, well, if you turn on the TV or you look in a magazine, you mostly see white people. If you go to this, it's mostly white people. If you look at the tops of companies, mostly white people. I'm like, okay, well, if you go to China, everything you're
Right.
saying is the same for Chinese people. If you go to Japan, it's the same for them. If you go to Nigeria, Ghana, the Middle East, any other country where you have an ethnic or racial majority, of course, the majority of people you're going to see in politics, in business, on the TV, everything, they're going to be the majority. So
Yeah,
that's
that's
not
the
white.
Peggy McIntosh stuff. Sorry, but that's the Peggy
Yeah,
McIntosh stuff. That's the unpacking the knapsack. This is how she
she's the one.
proved white privilege. It's like
She's
that's
the one who made the term.
yeah,
Right. That term didn't
that's
exist until 1989,
yeah.
and it's based off of one woman's idea, which wasn't even very well thought out. So this whole thing of it now becoming some kind of gospel is very strange, because it wasn't so long ago that no one had even heard of the concept of white privilege. If you said that in 2005, people would be like, what do you mean? Like, what is
Well,
that?
you're
Right.
international, so you can show a glaring blind spot, as we said before, in that just because you have been all around the world and
Yeah.
you're like, well, that's not the way that it works all around. Like, no, that's not. It's so
Mhm.
obviously false to someone who just has escaped out of their probably upper class East Coast Ivy League kind of tower or whatever she's from. But
Yeah. That's where all these ideas stem from. So
yeah,
that's why it's even more humorous.
yeah.
It's even more humorous because these ideas stem from
Well,
the most privileged people.
I wonder too if like how much of this is just to get like black dudes to be like, you're cool, man. Like, there's something in white people that really want that. I wonder how much of like Robin DiAngelo is just she wants to just have like a black lady with like braids just be like, come here, you're my girl. Like
Yeah.
she's like
Yeah.
my whole life's work just for that high five. I don't know.
Seriously, man. Like, dude,
Um,
it's just a funny
White
thing because
people
I mean,
love big ups from black people.
there we go, man. Isn't that could be a form of black privilege, right? The
Yeah,
idea
it's
that
so funny.
you've got some one or two additional cool points just sort of by default.
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know?
yeah,
So
you're winning. But I do want to talk about rap and hip hop, because hip hop culture has always been a level of telling stories and rebellion against the status quo. And one of my favorite, I don't know if it's hip hop, but one of my favorite bands ever is Rage Against the Machine. And even though I disagree with some of their politics, perhaps, I love the idea of just like pushing back against the machine. And what's so ironic is maybe the machine looks a little bit different now.
yeah.
Um, in the hip hop world, have you found that is that corrupted by identity politics as well? Like I know Eminem, his new album is like more political. I didn't listen to it, but I've just heard that it's really political. But
Mm.
politics were always something with hip hop back in like the the heyday, in the 90s and stuff like that. It was very much just like pushing back against the garbage that's going on in society, or like especially or Public Enemy talking about 911 is a joke in my neighborhood and stuff like that. Like these are real societal problems we're trying to highlight through our art. And you do you see that hip hop is just used as a tool for that still? Is that what you kind of use it for, is a way to try and bring awareness to problems and try to like just improve society? Because as much as like gangster rap and stuff like that back in the day was said it was glorifying violence and stuff, you can look a little deeper. It's not glorifying it, it's telling this is what our lives are like. And I mean, some of it might be, but it's
Yeah,
glorifying it. Yeah, sorry, but like it's
you
glorifying it
get
from
both.
the idea of like this is what is glorified. And I've taught
Yeah,
kids in gangs, and they're all about the life. So
yeah.
it's reflecting the realism of that. So just bring me into like a little bit of what your mindset is of why you've devoted your life to music to some degree, and what is kind of your aim? Like where's the trajectory that you're heading for your music?
I got you, man. I mean, my goal is to have a positive, noticeable, significant positive impact on over 10 million people through my words and through my actions and through living my life. Now, exactly how I'll measure and quantify that, I don't know, but I feel like when I've reached that level, it'll be fairly obvious. So I realized pretty early, I mean, I've always known the power of music. I fell in love with hip hop when I was about 11 or 12 and started listening to it a lot well before any time I started rapping. And there's no denying that hip hop music is extremely influential and that hip hop culture is influential. It's weird. It's like people like to acknowledge that when it's convenient and disregard it when it's inconvenient. You see, we all know hip hop culture is influential. We all know that, right? It sets so many trends. Some words that people now use, words that are now in the dictionary, stemmed from hip hop. You'll now hear people in the media using these terms, and it's like, look, that stemmed from that hip hop song. Whether you're talking about bling, right? Cash Money Millionaires, bling, dope, right? Saying something's dope, saying something, like there's so many slang terms that some of them might be a little bit rude, but a lot of that originates from hip hop. Look at the way people dress, the clothes people wear, the brands that people like, the drinks people drink. Like so much of that is influenced by hip hop culture. So where I'm concerned with hip hop is you've got to sort of take that all on board, because as an artist who makes positive motivational music, I know for a fact that my music inspires and motivates people, right? I know that for a fact because people write me emails, people tell me when they see me in real life, you know what, man, like you've had a positive impact on me. You've inspired me through your words and everything. So if all of that is possible, it doesn't make sense to say that hip hop can have no negative impact nor influence, right? If it can have a positive influence, then you can't suddenly say, oh no, like there's zero connection whatsoever between certain things being glorified in hip hop and the way that people behave, whether that's well in, and it's like people are very dishonest around that. So I'm not in the camp of, oh, there was some crime happened and it happened because of hip hop, right? It's not that extreme, but also this idea of like, oh, well, there's no impact whatsoever on the way that these young people behave and the music they're listening to. You kind of see what I mean there. It's like, well, if it can be a force for good, you can't really then say that it's impossible for it to be a force for negative, because people do, let's be honest, right? Young people especially, they want to be cool, right?
Yeah.
Whatever they want to do, and they want to be whatever is deemed cool in a society, in a community, in a culture. If what's considered cool is working hard and going to school and going to college and getting a degree and getting a job or starting a business, if that's what's considered cool, and that's what'll get you chicks, and that's what'll get you props from other guys around you, you'll be driven into that, right? That's why you have certain cultures that excel very well academically, or do very well and generally earn high incomes and stuff, and have low crime rates and have high rates of marriage and all of that, low rates of single parenthood. And then you have other places, and people don't like to talk about this because it's touchy. But you've got other places where what is considered cool, right? It's considered cool to join a gang. It's considered cool to go to prison. It's considered
Pop Xanax and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's cool to take drugs. It's cool. It's even cooler to sell them, right? It's cool. It's cool to have five. It's you've got your main chick, you got your side chick, you got your baby, right? That's considered cool, right? The idea of, I'm just going to marry one woman and I'm just going to have a family with her, right? That's almost like, oh man, that's corny, right? Some might even go as far as saying that's acting white, which is one of the worst statements that exists in if you're talking about something that's actually something that's positive, right? And these things have real pressures, and so it's a whole cultural cycle that people need to acknowledge and be willing to at least discuss if certain issues are going to be hashed out and sorted out. It's like no one wants to. It's like you were talking about earlier on the podcast about holding up the mirror, and people don't like what's in that mirror, which is why if you even bring some of these things up, like people react very aggressively, people get angry, people get hostile and whatever. And it's like, well, look, I mean, I love hip hop to death, man. I love hip hop music. I love rap, but some stuff is hard for me to defend. Some stuff is very difficult for me to defend, right? I mean, I might listen to it and I may feel it doesn't impact me, but would I want my niece or my nephew to listen to this? No, I'd be mortified if they heard some of the stuff that I listen to. And it's like, man, why is that? Should I be listening to something that I wouldn't want my, I wouldn't even want my nephew to hear the chorus of this song. So why am I listening to this? And fortunately with me, I do come from a stable background. I've been raised very well. I've got a very sort of set personality that's somewhat difficult to influence. So I know that I can consume a lot of stuff without it necessarily impacting me in a negative way. I mean, I've been listening to hip hop for 20 years and I don't even cuss. So obviously it can't be influencing me that hard. But but not everyone is like that. Some people are very easy to influence, right? Especially if you're talking about someone who doesn't have some of those same foundational pieces to their life that I do. Then you hear people say, "Oh, I was raised by hip hop." You must have heard people say that. Hip hop raised me.
Of course, yeah,
exactly. And it's like, well, what did hip hop teach you? It probably taught you some good stuff, right? Maybe it taught you entrepreneurship. Maybe it taught you that you can go from something to nothing.
For sure.
Maybe it taught you, certain cool things. But like I said, we can't pretend that there are not elements within what could be considered hip hop culture that are, more negative or unsavory or antisocial or criminal.
So this actually reminds me, and this is how we can close it out. But I guess what's unfortunate is when someone has tremendous skills in hip hop, and whether it's writing beats, whether it's writing lyrics, whatever, and they use that to glorify negative stuff, it's so unfortunate because it's what, I strongly believe in using your skills to do as much good in the world as possible. And some people are just gifted, I mean, like there are people who just, whether it comes easy or they have the work ethic, whatever. So to use that for something that's not going to try and do tremendous good, it's such a shame when I look at these influencers on Instagram that have millions of followers, and then it's just all just nonsense. We're going to do a burnout in our Ferrari over money, or we're going to just blow up my friend's coffee table. It's like, you've been given such a blessing, such a gift. Why are you not trying to use that for some sort of good? But your rap, Zuby, sounds like this concept. I just listened to an Eric Weinstein podcast, and he talked about the DISC, which is the disruptive idea suppression complex. Ooh. And it's this concept that he has, which is, Eric Weinstein's brilliant. And he's saying that innovative, like real game-changing ideas are so disruptive to the institutional systems in place that they put a big do not wanted, get out of here signs. And I wonder if your rap is that, because your rap sounds like it is very different than a lot of the hip hop that's out there. And is there an element that people are like, if you change hip hop to this, trying to promote this kind of stuff, and that like we have like it's we are going to try, and that's going to be too shaky. It's going to change what hip hop kind of viewed as, it's been entrenched as. I wonder if there's an element of what's going on in music where you're not given the respect, the idea, the attention that your music should, because it would be too disruptive. It would change hip hop culture in such a way, even though it would sounds like it would be for the positive. Change is change, and that would be too disruptive. Do you think that that's could be an element at play here?
I think that there's some truth to that, and I think that, look, all right, I'm gonna say something kind of heavy here, right? I think people like to talk about institutionalized racism and systemic racism, and I think that that may exist in places where people don't think it exists. Okay. So I do believe that in the world of music and hip hop specifically, there is a certain type of image and message that they seem very keen to promote. And this is not a message which portrays young Black men in a very good light to wider society. Okay. So people who are happy to go along with that and rap about guns, drugs, bitches, hoes, your new Maybach, how much crack you've sold, how much dope you've slung, right? That gets quite a lot of attention, and it has done for many years, right? It gets the promotion, it gets the push, it gets the big concert tours, it gets the endorsements. That, and we all know how economics, right? If other artists see that that is what works, what kind of music are they going to make, right? If that's the stuff that's getting the love and is making the money, the cycle perpetuates. And it's always seemed like it's an uphill battle for artists with a more, rappers specifically, with a more positive, empowering message to get that same limelight. It doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, you know, living in the era we live in now, no matter what you do, you can find your audience. But in terms of getting that mainstream love and getting embraced by the radio and certain channels and everything like that, it seems like if you are not willing to portray a certain stereotype of a young, aggressive, criminal Black male, they don't really want to hear about it. And if I think that might be where some of the real actual institutionalized racism is, because most Black people are not what is portrayed in hip hop, whether you're talking Black Americans or Black Brits or whatever. So the way that this is sort of the mainstream portrayal, and you're not seeing all of the the fathers and the mothers who are out there working and building businesses and being successful and all of that, right? You're not seeing that side of it, or it's not being uplifted and promoted in the way you would sort of expect it to be, given the narrative that people are saying about who they're trying to uplift. And I find that I don't want to be conspiratorial here, but I do find that quite telling. And as someone who's been in the music world for a long time, I have often wondered, sometimes I've been tempted to make a song that's a very stereotypical rap song, right? And and look, and when you listen to rap, when you listen to gangster rap, who do they talk about killing? Who do they talk about selling drugs to? What women do they talk about violating, right? They're not talking about, yeah, N-word, right? I'm going to kill that N-word. I'm going to shoot that N-word, this N-word, that N-word, right? Can you imagine if a white rapper came out and was like rapping specifically about killing white people?
Yeah.
Or a Chinese rapper came out rapping specifically about killing Chinese, right? They'd be like, "Was this guy got a mental problem? Right? What's going on?" Or if they said it about, like, Black people, you'd be like, "Gosh, this is a white supremacist rapper. This guy's like a KKK rapper or something," right? But if it's other Black people doing it, it's normalized. People give it a total pass, right? People don't even think about it. It's like everyone's dancing to it, everyone's partying, and it's like, when you think about it properly, it's like, man, that's kind of messed up. Why is it normalized? Why should it be normalized for young Black guys to rap about killing other Black guys?
Yeah.
right? If any other demographic did this in any other direction, people would be like, yo, this is messed up. Like this isn't normal. Whereas it's been going on for so long now that people don't even question it. And by me questioning it, there's going to be someone who's getting angry the fact that I'm questioning it, and they're going to want to call me a name because I'm asking these questions. And I'm like, yo, I'm part of this demographic too, right?
Yeah.
And I do care.
Know your place is a very
Yeah.
gross part of this institutional racism, the way it plays out. Know
Mm.
your place. You're this. You should need to act accordingly. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's
yeah. So it's a big conversation. Maybe we can do that one next time.
yeah. No, I appreciate you doing this, Zuby. Can you just give like just a little bit where people can see you, hear your music, follow what you're doing? Because I hope that everyone listening does.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at zubymusic.com, ZUBY music.com. My podcast, Real Talk with Zuby, is available on all platforms, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Same with my music. Just search Zuby on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen, and you can find my songs. And I'm on all social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. Twitter is the best one, at Zuby Music, ZUBY Music.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for doing this. I enjoyed the conversation a lot. I hope
Me
you
too,
did
man.
too. All right. Take care.